did. All these kids you give, it's never ever gonna fade away.
Okay, I want to show you guys how to play Axis and Allies. I bought this game back in 1982, and I have about 50 games under my belt. And I wanted to flavor this show and tell oriented towards a newcomer. So if you're a seasoned veteran, I would hope that you could use this video to hand somebody who you invited as a newcomer to a game session. Hopefully that will speed them up and get them oriented and help you get the game going quicker. I purchased this game back in 1982. Again, I played about 50 games, so probably over a 20-year period. In the last 15-ish years, I have not played, maybe 10 years. And so this edition was from back then, and at that time it was the second edition. So I know that there's been, I'm not familiar with all the editions that are out there, but I know there's one other that included Italy as an extra country. Okay, it's 1942, and it's the Axis, Japan and Germany, versus the Allies, Britain, Russia, and USA. The goal of the game, as stated on page 2 of the manual, if you are the Allied powers, you must capture both Axis capitals to win the game. So the Allies must capture Germany, capital, and Japan, capital, the island. And the Axis, to win the game, must capture 2 of the 3 capitals. They must capture either these 2 here, or those 2 there, or Russia and US. Optionally, the Axis can do an economic victory. So Germany and Japan together, if they gather enough income, which is specified by these black circled numbers, if they capture those territories, at the end of their turn they get that income. And if their combined income equals 84 or more, they then win the war. That has to occur at the end of play of these 5 countries going. So if they get over 84, but then the USA on their turn reduces them below 84, they still haven't won. So this game is for 2 to 5 players. It can be fun with any number of players. When there's 5 players, you'll find that more knowledge comes to the table to discuss happenings during the era. So it's kind of fun when you have more people and you invite new people to the game. Even though you may not know them, friends of friends, invite them, and it's really fun to have people bring parts of their knowledge of history along with them and discuss things as battles take place. The game board is large. I'd recommend several things. So I'd recommend, the game takes about 5 to 9 hours typically. It can run to 12 hours of time gameplay, and sometimes I've even had to, in game parties, I've had to spread it out over like 2 or 3 days just because of people's schedules and time. So I'd recommend that the person's house who's hosting the party, if they don't own the game, that you get them the game ahead of time and set up the game prior to the day of when people arrive. And we're going to talk about the setup here in a minute. If you're going to be tight on time, and you need to maximize your time use, if a person knowledgeable about game setup can set up the game for everyone before they get there, that will save 1 to 2 hours of talk and confusion about how the game's supposed to be set up. Use a big enough table that has borders around it, because everyone's going to be needing to put in their drink and their game pieces and managing their money. And so the attack board and this chart is going to be needed. They can be slid off the table temporarily, but you're always going to be bringing it back on the table. So you just need a lot of space. A good dining room sized table is helpful. Obviously, it's never going to be perfect. Number of people, chairs, and sometimes the dining room table might be too long. So we'll have to you can't use one end of the table. Also, related to people not having enough time to play, sometimes you can have someone leave. And so, for example, if you have somebody playing the US and Britain over here, and you know that this person can only commit to 3 hours, have them play Britain to get their appetite whet and help out the US. But when they have to leave, the guy playing the US can take over that position and coordinate them together. Similar to Monopoly, have someone committed as the banker to manage the money and the industrial complexes and into aircraft. That just kind of helps out. Everyone can kind of reach over and talk to that person what they need, and that person kind of has this tray in front of them to dish out whatever they need to do or exchange money or make change. The money actually it doesn't represent dollars, it represents production units. So it's 10 million man hours of production units. So that's how they do these denominations. It's kind of interesting. And again, the industrial units, each country starts out with a slightly different amount at the time of 1942. Okay, the dice. The dice are used on the battle board here. That's all they're used for. Actually, one exception to that is on this board here. It's used during the selection of these weapons. So you'll use one die for that. And actually, I think you can use multiple at the same time, depending on how much money you want to spend to try to develop that production. Okay, the chips. Chips are used during the game really just for management purposes. So, for example, if the U.S. has tanks and they could have several tanks over here, and if it becomes necessary to have over the gameplay, you buy more and more tanks, and let's say you're transporting them overseas to the other side of the board, you might physically run out of tanks, so you can represent tanks with chips also. So when you buy the tanks, you might say at the beginning of your turn, buy 5 tanks. You can just buy the 5 tanks, but you actually physically put 4 chips plus your 5th tank on top of there to represent what you actually bought. And just to let you know, there's only 3 bombers per country. So if you want to have more and more bombers and you buy them, you're going to be the reason there's only 3 bombers is that's how many physical places you're going to be limited to. So if you buy more bombers, they have to be topped with the actual piece. So let's just say this almost never happens, but let's just say things are going crazy in the game and you have something like this set up. You have all these bombers placed all over, and you say, "Oh, I want to purchase another bomber for Eastern U.S. Or I'm going to purchase 3 more." You can't do something like this and say, "Oh, these represent bombers." Well, no, you have to have a bomber on top of the chips to represent them. So in that way, the game, by design, is limiting how many geographic places you can have that particular unit. And the white chips are 1 unit of representation, and the reds are 5 units. If it gets crazy, you can just have a declaration that the reds bump to 10, and you would just have to physically do-si-do all that around to make sure nobody's getting a bump. Okay, these pieces are the industrial complexes. And like I said, that's where you produce things related to the industrial production of the country. And so you'll find where we'll go over how you set those up, but there's only going to be a certain number at the beginning of the game on each of these capitals, and this is the only place, wherever there's an industrial complex, that's the only place that you can introduce newly purchased units. These pieces are anti-aircraft guns, and they are defense pieces only, and again we'll place those on the board based on the setup, and they defend the countries that they're placed in, and they are pieces that move to the battle board but only in a defense scenario. If you look at the battle board, they go right here and they only act as defense. So if you're going to attack somebody, those don't trailer with you or anything. Those only help a defending country from attack. Okay, the rest of the pieces are in this storage container, and we have battleships here, airplanes, transports, submarines, tanks, battleships, bombers, and infantry. And we have tokens. These tokens are used in a couple places. Whenever you capture an enemy territory, let's say the U.S. Let's say the U.S. U.S. starts over here. They send some troops over here, and they slide down and capture Manchuria. So they will place their token on here to represent the fact that they now own that territory and that they get that income. The other place that the tokens are used is over here. So if you develop weapons, we'll get to that in a minute, and you finish developing a weapon, you put your token on here to represent that and to remind the other players that that's what you have. And the other place is on the National Production Board. The US this is just a token that represents where you're at. So the US starts out here, and each country will put their token in the appropriate starting position. At the end of the turn, you will collect your, I want to call it money, but it's really the production units, but I'll just call it money. You collect your money at the end of your turn based on where your token's at. Now practically, we're always mismanaging it and everything. What we always did was at the end of somebody's turn, we would just count up all the territories that they owned, and then would just hand out that amount of money to that player. And if we remembered, we would adjust this, slide this up or down to represent what we just handed them based on our count. Again, if the Axis combination is 84 or greater, they will win the game. So this is a good place to let the Allies know how much combined income they have and how close they are to winning the war. So the tokens are used when you capture enemy territories. You don't need to have the tokens on your own territory. So the US doesn't need to have them because the US is already owned. The only time you'll see a token, like say in Alaska, is if say like Japan comes over here, captures Alaska, then you'll see Japan's token sitting on there. And that will reduce the USA's income by 2, and it'll increase Japan's income by 2. So these cards are a little bit different for each country. Now this part of the card is the same for each country, and this chart here is specific for the country of how you do your game setup. So this is your setup, and we'll do that here in a minute. And this is a great thing to always look at. You'll need this a lot. You remember who's going next, and that's the order of play. And this is when you do play, this is the sequence you follow. And then depending on what you're doing with your pieces, you're either going to do a land sequence or a naval sequence and on the battle board. So we'll get to that in a minute. Now I'm going to set up Germany first here, and to do the setup you're going to use this part of the chart here. You're going to run down each of the territories and populate them with these pieces. This is used for reference later during battle and when you're purchasing new units. So you're really just going to use this part of the chart to do your setup. So this is the setup part, and it is very tedious, and again, you can have somebody who's hosting the game. If they can do it ahead of time, it saves the whole party the time to do the setup. If you're going to think you run out of time with players, that's a good thing to give to the group by having you spend the 1 or 2 hours to actually do the setup. I would also recommend that because it is so tedious and prone to errors, that when everybody gathers together, you should hand each other a card that they didn't set up to verify. Just go over one more time, just verify that it was set up correctly, because I've played lots of games where you get about 3 or 4 hours into it and all of a sudden you realize, hey, I forgot to have my piece here on New Zealand. Did somebody knock that off, or did I lose that in a combat? And so people start questioning things on the initial setup, and sometimes people will agree, like, yes, I know that I did not put that piece there, let's give it to you now. But anyway, it's nice to play the game from initial setup, not have any errors starting out, because that can affect you later on in the game. Okay, so Germany, we got 4 men, so I'll try to do this fast and cut the video out. I know this is very tedious. And I'll just show you the first couple, and then I'll try to cut and come back to a completed setup. Okay, there's 4 guys there, and this is where I might use those chips to help me organize this, because this can get crowded. Okay, next is going to be the armor, which is tanks. So we got 2 tanks in Germany. And next is 1 fighter in Germany. Put it right up there. Again, it's getting crowded already. And a bomber. Just the pilot in there. You know, people will know. I mean, obviously there's not in Sweden, so people know that. And next is going to be anti-aircraft, which is over here from the bank vault. That goes right there. Okay, battleship. None. There's no battleship here. Aircraft carrier, none. Not for Germany. Transport, they get 1 transport. That's this guy. And sometimes you'll, just by looking at the map, you'll see that the transport does not go here because that doesn't actually touch Germany's territory. So it is going to go right up here in the water here. There are a couple territories where there's a question as to where it goes in, and those are clarified in the manual about which sea a boat may drop into for the initial gameplay. Okay, that was the transport. Submarine 1. And it goes with that. Protect that transport. And, okay, the industrial complex. Just got one in there, so Germany. Okay, there's Germany. It's got the industrial complex there. And I'm going to go ahead and show you a little chip replacement here, because this is already a mess. I'm going to put 3 chips there and swap out those 3 men. They go back in the box. And now this is a little more organized, a little less chaotic, not a lot, but a little. Okay, and now I will set up the rest of this in that same manner and then come back for some comments. Okay, I'm halfway there. I've set up Eastern Europe with these guys right here. Fits nicely in that space without having to do any chips. And then we have Ukraine SSR here. Fits nicely also. Southern Europe. I got the 2 men, the tank, the battleship, aircraft carrier, the transport, and the industrial complex. Again, this industrial complex means that I can introduce new things on this territory, which means I can drop boats in the water right here. Okay, a quick note. As I'm setting up Western Europe here, I said I was going to drop a submarine in the water. And the question comes up, which water? Here or here? And the instruction manual will clarify it's supposed to be in this territory marked with the word Atlantic. And you'll soon find the logic in that, because the United Kingdom will be dropping their ships in this sea territory. So obviously the two cannot coexist based on gameplay, not real world. And notice down here in Africa we got 1 infantry on Algeria and 1 infantry on Libya with a tank. And that completes Germany. And notice how no more tanks, they're all deployed. So if you need to purchase tanks, you'll need to be putting a chip under one of these tanks and bringing the chip to your purchase area, which is, this is your purchase area here, and put chips under there to represent how many tanks you're buying. And the last little piece of business you need to do is grab your token, put it on Germany's board here under 32. That matches 32 right there, starting income. Then you go over to the bank and grab $32, and that goes right here for now. And Germany is ready to play. Okay, now I'm going to set up Japan, and just as an alternate way, before I told you to work your way down each country and go populate it with the items, but if your brain works better this way and your fingers grabbing all the parts out of the tray, you might start with the item and grab a pile of like the men and drop them into each of those territories. So you can do it either way. Okay, almost done setting up Japan. And just a quick note, the Carolina Islands plane actually sits on the aircraft carrier. Also note, I had to do chips, 2 chips for one of the places that had 3 men in it in order to really get everyone populated with men. As you'll see here, I'm out. They're all being used right now. And Japan's token goes right over here to 25, and grab the $25. That goes to Japan. Okay, the US is set up. They got the transport there, airplane, the anti-aircraft, a few other pieces. They're in China, and off the west coast you got those two, and the airplane in Hawaii is on the aircraft. Okay, and the US gets 36 income. Grab the token, put it on the US location here. Come to the bank, grab the $36. That's for the US, and the US is done. Okay, Russia is all set up. And a couple of quick notes. As I discussed before, you can set up your pieces by working through the countries or by working through the pieces. And I actually remembered a good way to do it is to set it up by country, and then after you set it all up, go back through one more time by the pieces and just make sure that you when you look at tanks, make sure that you can count a total of 4 on the board. So 1, 2, 3, 4. After I set up Russia, I realized that I got to the transport and I saw 1 here, and I know that I didn't have any on the board. That's when I realized I had forgotten this transport here. Also note that the industrial complexes, again, represent the places where you can introduce new pieces. So Russia can purchase boats at the beginning of their turn, and at the end of their turn they will introduce those pieces here, and the boats, because it's on the shoreline, they can drop the boats into water. And for Germany, they can introduce boats only on southern Europe or off of Germany here in this waterway by Sweden, but not into here because that'll be occupied by Britain. And Germany cannot introduce additional boats here because they don't have an industrial complex here. Optionally, they can buy an industrial complex, and then on the next turn, they could introduce boats here, but not at the start. So Russia, last step up here, put the piece on Russia, which is 24, and grab your starting money. 24, and that goes for Russia. Okay, United Kingdom is all set up, and that's what that looks like on the island, and they have men sprinkled throughout, and even over here, Canada. And oddly, they have a lone battleship and a lone sub next to the German fleet. And clarification in the manual was this submarine to be placed in Syria, Iraq. It goes in the north side of it, south of Turkey, not in the Red Sea zone. And just to clarify some other pieces on the board here, if you feel like you're getting too cramped to keep track of things, you can slide pieces up into their blow-up box. Same thing with Germany. Now, Germany has a blow-up box over here. So you could move some pieces up there if you felt like it was too crowded. Like you could say, like, oh yeah, I always put my tanks up here so I know my exact count without having to look at the clutter. And sometimes this is strategic, is that if you have pieces up here, somebody attacking, if you're playing Germany, somebody attacking you might look at Germany and calculate their math that they do want to attack, and they'll lose because once they bring it to the attack board, they'll realize that, oops, we were bringing a few items that they weren't really cognizant of. Now, in my early years of playing the game, that was key, was not letting people know your strategy, and kind of, it's almost like you're tricking them, like they weren't knowledgeable about that. And later on in the years, we talked about how that played out, and we decided that it was better to educate everybody into what was going on. It made the game more fun, and it made it more nail-biting, and it made it more strategic. And we decided that we would educate each other into our plans most of the time. Usually we would tell people our plans of doing A, B, C, or D, but we wouldn't tell them I was definitely doing D or C. We would just say general ideas of what we were thinking. And table talk was encouraged, and we found that just the play was better, and it just kind of educated everybody to be table talking all the time about what they were thinking of doing. And it, because this is a dice game, you can have a beginner player come into the fold, and you can train him, and he can beat all the expert players on the first game he's ever played because of the roll of the dice. They can totally ruin your strategies if you have a bad day. So we decided that table talk was encouraged, and we enjoyed that for many, many years. UK is complete, so I will grab their token and place it on the starting position of 30 income units. Grab 30 from the banker, place that with UK, and we are ready to continue. Okay, so here's the order of play. So Russia's going first, and the first thing they do, number 1 here, develop weapons and or purchase units. Okay, so I have $24 right here, $24. And of all the things I could buy, I'm not going to talk about strategies here or anything. I'm just going to say for a beginner, I would just recommend getting it about roughly half men and half tanks. So you come over here to see what you can afford. Cost is $3.05. So if I bought 3 tanks, that'd be $15. 3 men would be 9. That'd be exactly $24. A lot of different discussions could happen here. Again, for beginner, just do that. And what you'll do is you take your $24, hand that over to the banker. He'll manage that, and you're going to grab 3 tanks, place them on your new board, and you're going to grab 3 men, place them over here, and those just sit there for now. Okay, you're done with the box there, and let me show you one option here. I can forego one of these tanks, which is $5. Let me just put that back right here for now. And let me show you what I could have done with one of my $5. I could have gone over here to develop weapons, and for $5 I get 1 die. If I spend $10, I could get 2. I'm just going to do 1. For Russia, let's roll the dice. I got a 2. Because I rolled a 2, I lose. I did not develop any new weapons. Okay, what if? What if I had rolled the 6? The 6 lets me develop new weapons. I get one of these weapons. I don't get to choose it. I grab the dice again, I roll it, and it tells me I got a 4, so I get long-range aircraft. So I come back to my goodie box, grab a token, and mark that I have that, just as a reminder. Now what that does is it might influence what I buy. So should I still buy my tanks and men, or should I now work on my aircraft, because I just got a boost in what aircraft can do? So I will, for the purposes of this demo, I'm saying that I'm not doing this because it was all just for show. And again, that's a lot of discussion there about what pieces to buy based on your technology development. So I'm going to bring this tank back, so I got my original purchase there. If you really want that, you have to choose, I believe, you can't just roll one. I can't remember if you can roll 1 die at a time and keep spending the money until you get a developed weapon, or if you have to commit to like $15 for 3 rolls. I can't remember. Might have to look that one up in the manual. Okay, so purchase my units, and just remember that the new units go on this, on your card, your new units position. They do not get placed on the board yet until the end of these other sequences. That happens down here at step 5. Okay, now we move into combat movement. During combat movement, you can reference this column here. So men can move 1, tanks 2, fighters can move 4. Those are the 3 pieces I'm going to be dealing with here in this first example of Russia. Those movements. So the idea is you're going to choose a territory to attack, and then try to figure out what pieces can get there to join the battle. I'm going to attack Germany here, and this is Ukraine SSR, and I'm going to see what pieces can get there. So tanks can move 2. So this tank here, to slide down into that territory, moves 1. That makes it men 1. They can make it. These men 1. They can make it to the battle. These men here, they can't make it. They can move 1, and that's it. 1. That's it. You need from here. The tanks can make it. They can go 1, 2, and make it to the battle. So they can make it to the They can make it to the battle from Russia over to here. 1, 2. If this was occupied by Germany, I could go around this territory, Germany's territory, and drive the tanks up through here and down. That'd be 2 spaces as well. Okay, airplanes can move 4. So obviously this is just 1 space away, so that's 1. It makes it no problem. This airplane, 1, 2, no problem. Now, airplanes are interesting. Let's say these tanks. Tanks can move 2 for the attack. 1, 2. That's all they need to. If they can make the 2 spaces to get there, they're in the battle. Airplanes have to be able to retreat as part of their movement count. So let's say this airplane was over here. 1, 2, 3, 4. It can make it to the battle, but because it cannot retreat. It cannot join the battle, so it can't make it to the battle, really. Now the plane was here, so it's moving 2. It can join the battle. Okay, so one thing for a year plus, we all made the mistake of misinterpreting the instructions. And what we would do is we would declare a battle, bring all the pieces over to the battle board, have the battle, returned all the results back to the board, and then we would go over here and choose in the next battle. Well, we finally figured out that that's not correct. The sequence of play is you declare all your combat movements. So, in other words, you can't decide and choose your battles as you take on each separate territory. You have to declare them all first and then go into the combat phase. So, let's just say I was going to go into this battle. I didn't bring quite enough pieces and I lost. And because of that, I didn't want to allocate the resources to go into this battle. That's not how it works. You have to declare all your battles and then you will fight all your battles. The reason you might be tempted to do it the wrong way is that you might have this plane up here, and depending on the results here, you might want to leave it for defense. But if this battle went terrible, I did want to maybe fly it over here for this other battle or similar. So anyway, that's not the way it's supposed to be played. You're supposed to declare all the battles and then perform all the battles. Okay, I'm going to move all these pieces here to the battle board. Okay, all the pieces have been moved to the battle board, and notice there is no anti-aircraft gun that Germany owns in Ukraine. So if I was attacking Germany, you would bring the anti-aircraft gun over to the board, and the defender, for each anti-aircraft gun he owned, would roll a dice, and if he rolls a 1, he automatically destroys 1 airplane. And this airplane just goes to the back of the board, and he is not used by the attacker in the rolling of the dice. He loses that 1 die. But this is not an attack on Germany, so that anti-aircraft gun, which I will just put there, it's busy. And here's how the sequence goes. You start with your low number. These represent the numbers you need to acquire on the dice. So I have men here. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have 8 total men. I get to roll 8 dice. 4 and 4. And I have to get ones. Ones are better, which is just once. Okay, here we go. Okay, I got 2 dice. So I choose 2 things to put to the back of the board. Actually, the German guy chooses 2 things to take to the back of the board. He can choose any of these 2. Okay, I forgot to tell you, the pictures represent where you position everything. So notice how the tanks defend at 2. They defend as well as men as a defense. But me attacks at a level 3. Planes and tanks. My men defend at a level 1. So you got to do all that math when you're calculating attacks and defenses and making decisions for purchases. Obviously, buying lots of men is great defense. Not so good on attacking. It's only 1. Buying lots of tanks is great for aggressive attacks. But when you're attacked, the tanks don't help a lot. Okay, so we just destroyed 2 men by Germany's choice, not the tanks. And now the next set of dice is here. So you roll your 1s, then for your 2 items, 3 items, 4 items. So this is now the next set is the 3s, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I will get 5 dice here, and I'm trying to get 3s or less. And oh wow, I only got 1. So Germany chooses 1 to go to the back. Okay, now the guy playing Germany rolls. He gets to roll 1 die for each piece that's still on the board, even in the casualty section. So he gets to choose 4. He gets to roll 4 dice, and he needs 2 or less. And he got 2 of my guys. And I can choose anything on the board. It doesn't have to be the 2 column. It's anything on the board, my choice. Usually you choose the cheapest items on the board, but there might be some weird situations where you're looking forward to some serious defense issues and you might have to forego the more expensive items. It's your choice. So 2 men go to the back, and once you sequence through all of these sets, you're done. And for attacking and then for the defense, everything's in the casualty section is cleared off. So that goes right back to the German box. Those are out of the game now, unless they're repurchased. And these men for Russia, they're out. You know, they were just chips. So they go back to the banker. Okay, so the attacker has a retreat privilege. At this point, as me, Russia, as an attacker, I can make the decision to withdraw from the battle. If I do that, I would basically have to choose any one adjacent friendly territory for me to retreat into. So I can retreat here or here. And I would then place German's tank back on their spot, and I would put my I could spread my pieces accordingly. In this scenario, of course, I'm about to win, so I will just continue the attack. And every time you finish your set, you can always choose whether to continue or to retreat, depending on how the dice favor you. Okay, so now the men, I got 6 dice to roll for the men, and I got only 1, but that's all I needed. So that tank is a casualty. Now I'm done. Now Germany rolls for a 2 or less, and they got a 2 or less. So now I choose 1 piece to remove, and I'll just choose the man. Next step is to clear all dead items. That goes back there. Russia goes back in the Russian box, and the pieces are returned to the board. And in this scenario, my tanks capture Ukraine, and I get to grab a token and put it here that I own that money and land, and the men are also in that territory. I am now ownership of that, and if I'm quick enough, 3 production unit points there, I can slide my piece up 1, 2, 3. Okay, next battle, same procedure. I'm going to attack Japan, and Japan is a defense here, and the men are here. I'm attacking with men, and these men and this tank. This will be an interesting little battle. Okay, so 5 dice for a 1 for the men, and I got 1. So Japan chooses a man to go to the casualty box, and now I roll 3 dice for the 3 or less. Only 1. Ouch. Okay, so Japan chooses another man. Now defense, Japan, they do 3 dice for 2 or less. And they missed. Awesome. Now they roll 1 die for the 4 or less. Miss. Oh man, that was great. Okay, so those go back to the banker. And I'll keep going, obviously. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 dice for the men. And I got 1. So the man goes back here. Now I roll 3 dice for those pieces. Got 2. Okay, so that takes care of him. Everything's dead except they're going to retaliate first. First is the man for 1 die. And 2, he got one of my guys. I'll choose one of my guys. And then he rolls for the plane. And 3, he got one of my pieces. I'll choose another man. And we are done. We clear the pieces back to the box. These pieces back to the Japan box. And these pieces have now captured the territory. So the tank goes back here. The men go here because they captured. I get a another Russian piece to show that I captured the territory. I go up 3, 1, 2, 3, and now putting the planes in place. Now these planes started from here and here, and if I remember correctly, and they can move 4 spaces. So they cannot land in newly captured territory, so they have to back off to here. And this plane, I'm scared that he will be attacked by Japan. All that Japan would have to do is grab a man and put him on a transport, pop him off here for the battle with the plane, and he would get my plane. So because of that potential, I will fly this plane and land it back here. And I could optionally 1, 2, 3. I could fly them as far back as Russia on their journey, if I wanted to. Just for this purposes, I'll leave them there. Okay, so the battling is over, and I've captured that Japan territory and the Ukraine territory of Germany. And now the next phase is non-combat movement. Anything that hasn't moved during combat movement can now be moved. So I might decide how, just for demo, I'm not thinking through a lot of strategy here, but I'll decide to move these. We'll get 1. Again, you got your movement, how many territories all these pieces can move. Always refer to that. So the men can only move 1, and I'm going to move these men up here to help me with reinforcement, because there's a lot of German pieces that can come and attack Karelia. So I move them up there, and I guess I'm going to continue these planes on their journey to bring them back here. It's, again, they were here and here. They were here and here, so 1, 2, 3, 4 for their full journey. And these pieces were already in combat, and they captured, so they're done. And those men just moved, planes moved. These guys, I'll move them 1 space heading over towards Germany. There's, again, I'm not talking strategy here. I should probably be doing something over here with Japan. I'm just trying to demo things here. The boat could move, but it can't because the adjacent sea zone is occupied by United Kingdom, and I can't move into a oh, I'm sorry, that's not Japan, it's United Kingdom. I can move my ship into this territory, and then I would enjoy the protection of whatever British pieces are in here, which in this case would really just be the aircraft carrier and the transport. So if I left it here, it's possible for a German plane to just come out here, strafe me, sink me pretty easily based on the numbers. And so I'm thinking I'll go ahead and move that there. The reason to not move it there would be that if next turn I wanted to transport some men, that reduces my movement by 1, having to get all the way there first. Okay, so now the next step, I'm done with movement, non-combat movement. Next I'll place new units. So I basically just take my new pieces here and I'm going to place them all just right in Karelia for defensive purposes. And that's the end of the sequence. One more sequence, collect income. So now I am at 30. So $30, 10, 20, 30. That comes back to Russia. That's going to be used during the next round for Russia. Okay, that completes Russia. Oh, and one other thing. Remember, I introduced the Russian pieces here, but only because it had an industrial complex. So, in other words, I couldn't just come over here and put all my new pieces. It has to be at an industrial complex. So for Russia, at the beginning of the game, that's either here or here. Now, if at the beginning of the game I had purchased an industrial complex and placed it here, I would have to place it here, wait till the next turn to purchase new units and place those new units here. But I can't purchase an industrial complex and new pieces and introduce all of that all at once at an already occupied territory by myself. Also realize that these are kind of important, because if I let Germany capture Karelia, at that point Germany will own the industrial complex right here, and they will be able to introduce most likely new tanks into this territory, saving them the trip from the mainland. So they'll be able to introduce new tanks here. Vague in my mind is it might be limited to 3 total pieces per turn. Not a big deal, but I think that's in the rules somewhere. So if they capture Russia, they can pump out 8 per turn, I believe. But at that point, the game is probably about over. I think that does it for the basic knowledge of how to play the game and the mechanics of it. I did leave out, I'm not going to go into like rehearsing a bunch of scenarios and showing you how to go to the battle board. I think you'll figure that out. I mean, just one sequence through the battle board kind of gets that done. But I think I will still show you some interesting things about how combat happens between land and water units. So I'm going to do that next. Okay, ships can move 2 spaces at a time. Any ship, subs, transports, battleships, and aircraft carriers. So, example, just 1, 2. And that's during the combat movement or non-combat movement phase. Transports, they can move 2 during non-combat or combat. So for example, this transport, get the lighting right here, this transport can go 1, 2. Now on the way, it can pick up things. So 1, pick up a man, 2. And that's the end of its turn. Now, this is Japan here, so that could be non-combat movement, but you could also do it in a combat movement. So again, this could be 1, 2, bring that man with you and attack this island and try to take that man out. If you both end up dying, the island stays clear. It's still Japan territory. Obviously not a big deal since there's no economic value there. But it would get rid of the man, and Japan couldn't come out and grab it to use in other battles. Okay. There is a first shot barrage if you wanted to bring this battleship with you. 1, pick up 2. You bring all these pieces to the battle board. This doesn't fire during the normal battle, but similar to anti-aircraft, it fires a beach barrage first to see if it can take out any men. I believe it has to roll a 6 to get a hit. And that's 1 die per ship getting a beach barrage. After the beach barrage, they leave the battle board. Okay, ships can also move during non-combat, and they could, for example, these men, if you wanted to move them up towards Alaska and then over here to save a little bit of time, instead of on one turn you could only move them 1 space at a time, the next turn, move them over here. But if you wanted to, you could get them on a transport. So you could do a load and then movement 1, 2, and you can either leave them on the ship or you could safely just drop them off as part of your sequence, movement sequence, and in hopes that the next turn you would do a load 1 and unload. And the reason you might do that and not leave them on the ship at the end of your turn is because if Japan sends some fighters out here to sink the ship, the men would go with it. So to unload the men would be kind of helpful, a little safety factor. Let's say I wanted to bring this sub 1, 2 and attack this Okinawa for 1 production point. And I would also, I could either bring the aircraft carrier or I could just fly this airplane. Well, actually, I will have to bring the aircraft carrier because here's how it flies. 1, 2, because there's a black line here. Because there's a black line around the island, that's a 3. So from the airplane goes 1, from the battleship, from the aircraft carrier, the airplane goes 1, 2, 3, 4. In order for that to be a safe place to land, the aircraft carrier must move 1, 2 to allow it to land inside that water zone. So it'll land and make 4. So the aircraft carrier doesn't have to move there, doesn't have to commit to moving there. If the plane is lost in battle, then the aircraft carrier can just stay put. But if the airplane survives the battle, then the aircraft carrier will have to move here. The airplane will have to land here because the airplane cannot land on newly captured territory. Now, if you take this group to the battle board for your battle and clear and you kill this soldier, you have not captured this. You still have to have a man on a transport that can land on the island in order to capture it, in order for you to collect that dollar. So you would have had this on the first turn. The transport can't make it 1, 2. That's as far as it can go. So it would have to be on the second turn. You would first load up 2 men on here and go 1, 2 in preparation for attacking this island. And then you'd bring all these pieces to the battle board, and you would have, if you were losing the battle, you would have to retain a living man, living soldier, in order for it to step onto the island and capture it. If I want to attack this island as an example of a territory that has an enemy, land and both sea, all these pieces would come to the battle board, and I would bring my pieces as well. And the same rules apply to capturing the territory as just explained up in Okinawa. This is a bad example because this island has no value, dollar value to it. If Russia wanted to transport one tank can fit on transport, or 2 men. If Russia wanted to transport some pieces over to UK, they can do it by going 1, load, 2, unload. That's how you can move pieces. And if it was already here, you could have gone load, 1, 2, unload. Vice versa. Here's Canada, Britain and Canada. They can go load 1 and unload in the mainland, or 2 and unload up here. That's actually a pretty good move. And this, another one they can do is they can go load 1, unload for the attack. And this can go, I was going to explain this one can load, not even have to move 1 space, but unload for the attack and bring planes as well. A quick note, if during attack, let's say UK wanted to bring this plane and attack southern Germany, they would have to fly over anti-aircraft gun here. Every territory that a plane has to fly over enemy territory with the anti-aircraft gun in it, every one of those anti-aircraft gun fires on the battle board right here. So if you have an aircraft on the path to a battle, you'll roll 2 dice against that plane. Battleships. Think of battleships as floating islands that have no black border around them. Anytime you have a black border and the planes are trying to move, you count spaces whenever you cross a black border. So from here it's 1, 2, 3, 4. If you're flying to an aircraft carrier, for example, from here you just go 1 and you're already on the aircraft carrier. You can land there safely without burning movement space. Okay, none of these ships can move across these water boundaries until they clear out the zone that they want to cross into. So this British ship, sure, it can go down this way, but it can't go 1, 2. It can't join up with this guy. You have to first clear out this zone to traverse it. So similar to Germany, they can't just go 1, 2 because you are in the territory. So Germany has to come here, stop here, and attack that sub first. And Germany can do things like with the transport here. They can bring the tank during non-combat movement. They can load it up and then unload it, or vice versa. Bring these 2 men or this tank, load the 2 men and unload them, or load the tank and unload it. Again, 1 tank or 2 men is the most any one ship can have. So a good strategy for Germany here is to purchase transports, drop them in the water so you can transport more things across there if that's where you're wanting to head down here and capture more economic value. Okay, notice neutral territories. Spain, Turkey, Switzerland, Sweden. You can use those as points to land or to migrate through. If this was not here, let's say it was down here, and the U.S. wanted to land either 1 tank or 2 men over in Spain, they could. They could load 1, 2, unload. When you do that, you have to pay the bank $3 to put your icon, your token here. That means you've paid to be there. If you're, let's say this tank was unloaded here prior, and they wanted to attack Western Europe, they cannot in one turn go 1, 2 and attack and pay that $3. When you traverse into a neutral territory, pay the $3, the unit must stop there and stay there for that turn. Okay, planes cannot land in newly captured territory. We covered that prior. So obviously they can land in friendly territory. So if these planes from US wanted to migrate down to Africa, 1, 2, 3, 4, can make it. 1, 2, 3, 4, same thing. Actually, I think the bombers are 6. Let's see here. Bombers can move 6, that's right. And then you could bring this tank, load, 1, 2, unload, and you could set that up here to help defend Africa from Germany expansion. Okay, submarines. Submarines are pretty cool and can be quite deadly for naval battles. There's a special rule for submarines in an attack. So a sub attacking, when it goes to the battle board over here, it has the same concept as the anti-aircraft guns. It fires first a special round against any ships, not planes. It fires the dice. You roll the dice first. If it gets a 2 or less, one piece that I'm sorry, got this switched around. Attacking sub rolls a 2 or less. The defense country can choose any naval piece they want to take out of the battle. They don't move it to the casualty line. It immediately goes to their storage box. It's out. And so that is something special that submarines have. It's called the first attack special rule. One thing I never covered about movement was that the board is, even though it's a flat earth, it wraps around. So if you want to move some ships from the US, they can go 1 and 2. They can move there. And this piece of water is around Florida, goes through. So you can move from Los Angeles to Washington in 2 spaces. So in one turn you can do that. So you can shift quite a bit of hardware from one coast to the other. Oops, correction. I made a mistake. That is 2 turns because it has to go below Mexico 1 and 2 and then come through the Panama Canal. Totally messed up on that, sorry. And now these 2 pieces of water are connected. So 2 would put you here. And the next turn you could get up to the Washington. So it would take 2 turns to get to Washington. Okay, so I think I've covered all the basics to get you started with the game, all the movements and how to do the physical gameplay. And next I want to go over just some general concepts with how the game flows, and I'll end it there, and I will not go into specific strategies because you guys will just figure that out as you learn and play and interact with each other. Okay, the US has lots of money and can buy lots of hardware, but what is their problem? Their problem is they can't get into the game like the other players can. So the US can basically drop transports and ships and men and tanks into the water and start working them up here, up toward the north. They can also spend half the money or the same money on this, or I mean all the money on the west coast, and work their way up and put pressure on Japan. Now, if US just builds forces here, even though they're not attacking Japan in any way, they will have a presence and put pressure on Japan, and it will change what Japan does. Japan just can't have free hiatus over all this property over here. Anyway, so that's US's problem, is they can't get to the battles very easily. They have to spend a little extra money doing so, transporting things. United Kingdom is similar. They are on an island, so lots of things have to be transported, but unlike the US, their airplanes are much closer hops to get to things. So one thing Britain can do is they can spend spend their money on just fighters in support of defense of Russia and against Germany. So that's one thing they can do. They can also drop transports and get tanks and men over to the battle zones. They don't make as much money as America, but they're closer, so it's kind of an interesting balance there. Now, Japan's problem. What is Japan's problem? Of course, they have the island thing going on. They have the stress of working out, trying to expand up here, but then being pressured by the U.S. And depending on what the U.S. does, it affects what Japan does. Kind of oddly, Japan goes before the U.S. So Japan has to make some weird decisions, not knowing what the U.S. is going to do. Depending on what Japan does, the U.S. may adjust what they want to do. What is Russia's problem? Russia really just is the main thrust against Germany, and they just feel like they want to try to help maintain their vast space and keep those economics rolling, and they feel like they have to spend all their money on keeping Germany contained. German Germany's problem, I don't think they have a problem. They have some pretty good scenarios with tanks and men. They almost rarely spend money on planes and ships. They just use those resources that they initially get, and they dwindle. And if they spend money on tanks and men, they really put the pressure on the other enemy countries. So if they work on expanding down to Africa, they can put a little economic hurt down there, and they can keep rolling tanks and men to put pressure on Russia. So that is kind of how the game flows, and it's just a matter of decisions and economic swings on what people want to do, and see how it actually plays out. I hope you newcomers have found this video useful, and I hope you regulars can use it as a tool to encourage new people to try out the game with you guys. And I really hope you enjoy it. I really love playing this game. Might help people get away from the video scenario. I'm sure most gamers also do all the video scenarios, and this is a game that's so much fun. It's just totally apples and oranges compared to hopping on your computer and doing PC games or console games. Encourages you to do table talk. If you know any history buffs or history majors from college, invite them. It's very entertaining to just discuss the whole era and what was going on. And I always learn something new. I want to say out of 50 games, I can't tell you any one game was similar to another. It's so much fun. Every time you play, it's just a different game based on what people want to do. Mistakes being made, strategies being performed. And again, I hope you guys really like this video, and hope you guys use it and are encouraged to just jump right in or find a game and purchase it on eBay. I don't even know which ones they still make or produce, but it should be a great fun for you, and hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much.
Praise the Lord and pass the ammunition. Praise the Lord and pass the ammunition. Praise the Lord and pass the ammunition, and we'll all stay.